I loved watching that band. When we were on tour, they were amazing. Such a
Right on.
presentation. It was such an era.
How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just a little bit of a warning. I have my 2.5-year-old running around here, so he may make an appearance.
Yay, what's his name?
His name is Harrison Rex, named after
That's a
George.
cute name. That's
Yeah,
cute, Harrison.
yeah. We
I love that name.
we thought for a split second, and we'll get into it later, Axel, but I didn't want to go all full GNR into his name.
Axel's a cute name, but I prefer Harrison is really good. Will you call him Harry or you just stick with Harrison?
We're gonna stick with Harrison. I
That's
mean,
great. I love it.
obviously, if he gets older and he doesn't like it, we'll talk. But now, same thing with his hair. His hair is past his shoulders. A lot of people think he's a girl, but long hair don't care. Wanna just like me, use it before you lose it, right?
That's cute. Yeah, you might as well.
Right on. So welcome to the podcast, Roddy. My name is Brando. Appetite for Distortion, episode number 541. How are you, sir? How are you doing today? I know you're pretty busy.
I'm great, Brando. That's so many episodes. 581?
Yeah. Well,
That's a
41.
lot.
41, but yeah, that's
41 still. That's a lot of episodes. You must be getting really good at what you're doing, yeah?
I'm trying. I mean, our friend here, our mutual friend Bill, can tell you. I mean, and I've been at iHeart for over 10 years, been in radio for 20, but somehow this little side project of a GNR themed podcast has just allowed me to interview people like you. And I've had Alice Cooper on and Henry Rollins and all these amazing people that I've always looked up to have the kind of have a conversation with all through what I call 6 degrees of GNR bacon. Again,
Insane. I didn't realize that's what your show was, but I'm coming to terms with it right now. Fascinating. You
well, I
know,
guess.
I have a real
Mhm.
connection to. Have you read my book?
Yes, I haven't read the whole thing, but I have read parts. I know you certainly have connections to GNR, and I'm prepared to talk about them. But we can save it because I want to talk about just the beginning. How you started with the book, and because it's not all about GNR. So when did you decide to write the Royal We? And congratulations for it being published. And how long of a project has it been?
Thanks, Brando. Do you go by Brando or Brandon?
I guess it's also a duality issue I have. I have Brandon Weissler up here for my producer name, but I'm going to change it to Brando right now, so it's less
You'll be
confusing.
Brando. Okay, that's cool. Thanks, Brando. Yeah, I started writing this book kind of during COVID times a little bit. And it was during a time that the Trump presidency was first starting, and there were a lot of voices out in the world that was sort of shouting a lot of hateful things. And it just felt like an important time for me as a gay man living the life that I have to sort of shout my truth back and throw that into the mix. So just sort of as presentation and as a sort of like a big heralding of who I am and how I speak and how I live my life, that felt really important to me. So I just started to kind of chronologize my life, my traumas, everything that I've lived onto paper. And over the course of, I'm gonna say like, I don't know, 6 months, it became a book. That
Okay.
wasn't really the intention at first, but like I really liked my writing style. I liked the way that I was saying things, and it felt like something that was going to work in that regard. And I read a lot, and maybe halfway through my process, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make this. I'm going to turn this into a book, and it was a definite decision. And look at me now.
Look at you now. Well, I mean, thank as a fan of Faith No More and someone who champions what you stand for. You know, my sister-in-law is gay, and I have family, friends. It's one thing for, a straight man to speak up. I have certain privileges, and I don't know. Reading your book, I'm 42. I think I forgot that Elton was like kind of hiding it for a bit because he's obviously very out now. We're in a very different world now where you see comments like, "Oh, I don't need to know this. I don't need to know this." Well, there's a reason why you need to know because if you look at your story and the struggle that you had hiding it, so all these years later, is it difficult still to talk about, or do you feel a bit more strength in who you are, having gone through everything you have?
Definite strength. I like have a real sense of pride in who I am and who I've been and what I've done. I have no shame, which is sort of like contrary to the way that I was brought up. I was encouraged to have shame as a kid by people like Elton John who didn't really talk about their sexuality and didn't talk about like you don't the premise of you didn't need to know this yet. Like now in today's age and who I am and how I've lived and sort of the pride with which I'm able to sort of like carry myself with. You do need to know that. This is something you need to know. If you don't know this as a strong and powerful force and a person that can be passionate and thoughtful and contribute to our sense of a nation, our sense of a community, you got to get on board and you have to sort of like open your mind up. And sort of my premise is all about that. Like, if you don't know this, yeah, you do need to know this. It's important. You need to know gay people. You need to know a queer voice because it's an accepting and unique characteristic that kind of makes a big part of what we are as a country, as a community, important.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And just as a parallel, not the same, but it's always like the silent battle. I champion. Obviously, I mentioned GNR podcast, but my secondary theme I like to say is mental health. I talk about my
Oh,
battle with
cool.
depression. Yeah, I talk about my battle with depression. I lost my father to suicide about 12 years ago. I
Oh,
wanted
wow.
I wanted to end my life. Before that, after that,
Hmm.
obviously I'm in a much better place now. With I never thought I would have a son and get married. I'm survived
Right.
it. I've come through it. Not all my friends did, and it's scary. And I have a neurological disability, so some people just see me walking with a limp and they think I'm trying to act cool. They don't realize I have leg
Whoa, whoa.
braces, and so
Right,
it's always anyone who has a silent battle. I
right.
really respect coming forth with that, but. I want to talk about just a little bit of the music as well because I'm sure it shaped the music who you are. So one of my favorite songs ever, "We Care a Lot." Can you take us back to you writing the lyrics and what inspired that?
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun that you bring that up. Like, thanks for sharing that about yourself first, Brando. That's really intense and powerful. Like mental health for
You're
sure. I
sharing
mean,
and
that's
I'm
a
sharing.
something
That's
thing
how
that
I
we,
feel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something like, I mean, back when I was a kid, that's something we didn't really pay a lot of attention to. And I talk about it in the book. Like, I had so many friends and people in my life that were so eccentric and insane. And I mean that in the best possible way, just exciting people. And looking back on it now, like a lot of those people took their lives. And a lot of those people were dealing with mental illness. But as a people back in those days, in the 1980s, we didn't speak about it as such that much. So it's something that's like now I think it's a lot easier for us to talk about. And that's definitely for me progress. But how it came up in terms of like music for me was interesting. Like, we at the time that we care a lot, we wrote We Care a Lot. I think there was a collective sort of like consciousness of like helping each other out in a weird way. Like, I think at that stage in the game, like Live Aid was happening, the first sort of Live Aid,
Hmm.
which was this huge concert that raised money for for, uh for people in need. And like Bob Geldof, like he had sort of like spearheaded a movement back then. He was a singer of Boomtown Rats, and he spearheaded sort of a movement in which like musicians came together and helped and were kind of politicized in helping people in need. And at the time, that was sort of like really odd. And we didn't really necessarily feel a part of that, but it was something that was in our collective consciousness, like helping people and being heroic. And I bring that up because in writing the words for We Care a Lot, they were really cheeky and funny when we wrote them, and we talk about the Transformers. We talk about Madonna. We care a lot about Madonna, and we caught for Mr. T. I said those words because I think Mr. T was like arrested for some sort of like drug charge back then or something like that. But anyway, it was very topical. And at that time in our world, like things had become topical in a way that they hadn't before. This was before social media, and we would just learn about things like on the news or in the newspaper, and it is really kind of long-winded sort of explanation. But anyway, it sort of came down to like superheroes and like helping people was this new concept that was kind of funny and weird. And the slogan, We Care a Lot, sort of tapped into that in a cheeky, funny kind of way. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was this sort of funny thing. At the same time, like Run DMC was just happening,
Hmm.
and we hadn't really heard rap so much in my world, and like Grandmaster Flash had just happened, and like this band Soul Sonic Force was happening, and there were these new sounds on the radio and in our mix that were kind of dance but also rock. And what we did was sort of like create a combination of like that kind of vibe, a rap sort of like thing with guitars, and then this sort of slogan of like helping people in a way, like we care a lot, which was sarcastic, but at the same time also not. That's a really long-winded explanation. I hope it makes sense to you, Brando. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I loved hearing it. No, no, I do appreciate that answer. Long-winded or not, it's your answer. That's the one I wanted, and it's a
Thank you.
song that stands the test of time. Whenever comes on my playlist, it sounds fresh and just a lot of the stuff that you wrote. And I want to get into more of your music, some things you addressed in your book, and I have some fan questions. I know I only got you for a limited amount of time, so I'll try to cram it as much as I can. But I know you processing what you appetite for distortion really was, and to kind of talk about on the theme of music and where we started, because you do talk about your way with words. You've referenced it before. Guns and the Roses is how you refer to them in your book. Any reason for like the choices and when instead of Guns and Roses, why Guns and the Roses? And I don't know if you
It's
just funny. It made me make me smile. I was
It
curious if
is
there was a
funny. I don't know really why. I think like all my life I've kind of like used with my sisters and my family and my good friends, we've always kind of like been into nicknames. And that always sort of just, for whatever reason, initiates a chuckle amongst ourselves, and we'll call things like different things. And for some reason that was funny to me to call Guns N' Roses the Guns and the Roses. I
okay.
don't know why, but it just kind of made me smile. Also, the whole premise of my book is I don't really give a lot of last names. Like I talk about Courtney, I talk about Kurt, I talk about famous people who were in my lives, but I never use last names. The premise being I don't want to brag. Like the notion of bragging to me, particularly in sort of the concept or the medium of a bio sort of story or a memoir, I'm really not into sort of the bragging aspect. So to call the Guns and the Roses the Guns and the Roses is a little bit left of center, and it isn't so much on the money, and it just made sense to me in a prosy kind of way.
I like it, and you're right with the because I said I didn't read the entire thing yet. I have to read it. Then my son stops me to read like Goodnight Moon or like the ABC, so I can only read so much of like adult stuff around him. But yeah, the only person which you had no choice to use their full name was Slash because he has no last name, which I it just made me laugh. So if we could talk a little bit about that infamous tour, was it as bad as an experience for Faith No More as we've heard in the past? Mike Patton in his interviews has been very anti Axel. You weren't really like that in your book, but I want to preface it. And if anyone's going to ask this question, I feel like I'm a little nervous asking it. But if anyone's going to do it, I think it's come from my show. I've interviewed people about 1 in a million before because you do talk about that in the book.
Sure.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
and I've interviewed both Tracy and Roberta, who you were on tour with. They're the backup singers, and Ernie C from Body Count. They all gave very insightful answers about what Axel really is and just the usage of the words. I thought Tracy's hit home most for me, that she understood who he is and who he isn't, but perhaps it lacked the sensitivity that it could still hurt people, even though he wasn't that person. So if you're comfortable, what do you think about that song? Did it make you hesitant to even go on that tour? Did you? Because yeah, Axel was a unique character, and I don't know firsthand. You do.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Brandon. It is, yeah, it brings up a lot of sort of like potentially, yeah, volatile things. When we agreed to go on that tour, it was like, how could you say no? Guns N' Roses and Metallica asked us to open up for that circus of a tour, and that was the biggest tour that had ever happened in the world, you know? And of course, yeah, we're gonna do it, and we jumped in knowing what we were doing. Um, at the time, like as a gay man, like jumping into that sort of forum, when that song was out there and Axel did use the F word, and the N word in the same song, like that was problematic for sure, straight up. And I mean, there were pickets and stuff, and people for sure they got a lot of flack for that. And it did strike me as just like a little bit insensitive for a white man to sort of be throwing those words around. That's not really his language to use. And you could say, like, I guess, like, oh, he was just being badass. He's just being Axel. But yeah, it was really insensitive. And I don't know if they were the type of band to me that sort of like had like a higher regard for sort of humanity in that way. Like I don't mean to be all heavy-handed. Like I liked Guns N' Roses; they were fun to watch, and I love Metallica, were like a big band in my world. But it just felt like there was a lack of sensitivity in their overall presentation, and that's kind of something that they were too. Like I mentioned, badass. They were kind of a badass rock and roll band, and they didn't really care too much about what people thought of them. And okay, hats off to that. But I think in the process, yeah, it was a different era, and I think they probably offended a lot of people. And coming from a white man perspective, that's a little problematic, and it was back then, and it is now. That's just is what it is. And you can be badass and not care what people think about you, but there's going to be repercussions. It is what it is.
I always looked at the perspective, and again, I have to step aside from my fandom and listen to the people who are around it. That it was just like he's talking as a character, like kind of like a Quentin Tarantino, like he does in his movies, and some people are offended by the language he uses in his movies. So
For
that's the way
sure.
I always saw it. Because if he was just trying to be a badass, that's not. I don't think that's cool either, just to be a badass. But if you're telling a story, and for you to tell that story, you have to use that. I guess, but I see that it has hurt other people, and they left it off the box set. I'm sure they. I'd like to think I can't speak for them, of course. The times have changed. There's certainly not a song they're going to play live anytime
For
soon,
sure.
and anything like
I
that.
mean, it's happened a lot in time. Like, think about Patti Smith, had rock and roll N-word. That was a huge song for her, and that was a huge statement that she made. You
Women is
know,
the right,
um,
right. Woman is the
rock
end
and
of right.
roll,
Yeah,
yeah, N-word,
right.
that song, Patti Smith
Hmm.
song. I think she shies away from like doing that now, but it was a different mindset, and it was a different, that was even earlier than the Guns N' Roses sort of using those words. But I mean, we're not foreign to sort of like people pushing buttons and people, being provocative. And I definitely am of that camp. Like, I'm a very provocative person. And part of my book is all about pushing buttons and throwing things out into the world that, like, are going to offend people. So I get that vibe. But for me, there's a line that I would never cross. And one of those lines is a racial line. I would never go in that sort of arena. Whether I'm speaking from a character or not, like I get it. Like, and I have problems with Quentin Tarantino. Yeah,
Okay, and I respect that, and I wouldn't tell you certainly anything different. So I appreciate your insightful answer. It just stinks, I think, for GNR fans because the music is so good, so we can't really enjoy it. We're not going to go around blasting it on the stereo. Let me
well,
squeeze
that
in.
particular song, maybe, I mean, I'm a big fan too. They sound amazing. Like, I loved watching that band. When we were on tour, they were amazing, you know? Such a
Right on.
presentation. It was such an era. It was really special.
Let me. I want to squeeze in like a couple quick fan question or two before I know you have another interview. Unrelated. This is from Connie Pat from Greece, longtime listener. He wants to let you know there's a small niche of people over there that celebrate live at Brixton Academy is the greatest live album of all time. Do you remember anything from that day?
Absolutely. It was such a fun show. My parents came to that show. That was in Brixton, and that was sort of at a cusp for Faith No More when we first started like playing these big performances. We played a couple in a row at Brixton Academy, and it might have been like a bunch in a row, but I remember they all sold out, and it was a real proud moment. Like my parents came. I remember we all took the tube and went there on the train to Brixton and got out. My parents were with me. It was a really special time.
Right
I
on.
love that performance. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And one quick one before I let you go. Obviously, Jim Martin was famously absent from the reunion, and now I believe I think it was one of your previous interviews that said Mike Patton is shows no interest. Is you think Faith No More is done and you're just moving on to the next thing, or are you not even thinking
You
about it
know,
anymore?
people keep asking that, and then I like kind of am candid about it, and I get a lot of, I don't get flack for it, but I get misrepresented. So
You can say
I'm
pass. You can
just,
say no answer if you want.
yeah, I mean, I don't even want to say no pass. I mean, I don't really feel weird about it, but it's just like I keep answering that question, and then it turns into a headline like Roddy Bottum says Faith No More calls it quits. I'm not saying that. I'm just like, I'm really proud of what we did. I will just leave it at that. We have such a great legacy, that band. We really challenged the norm, and we really carried ourselves in a really profound way that I'm so proud of. I don't personally feel the need to like continue and propagate that any more than we have. Like, I think we did a great job, and I can sit back and be proud of that and not have to do it again.
I can agree with that. Faith No More is one of the top rock bands ever. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. I mean, the SNL performance, all these things. But I hope we get to do this again because I know you're pressed for time. Just
Brando,
Roddy,
it would be fun. I really appreciate your sensitivity and like what we've talked about. Thanks for talking with me.
thanks for talking with me too. It was an honor, and as I said, like, I hope we get to do this again. And
Me
congratulations on the
too.
book.
Thanks a lot. Give my best to Harrison.
You got it. I was hoping he would say hi, but he's putting laundry away with my wife. Another one of those interviews that I could have gone on for an hour, if not two, but sometimes it's good to limit them and leaving you wanting more. And this was through my job and what that's why he's doing a radio tour and I get my slot and grateful for it. And I'd like to think based on our conversation and being sharing with each other, and that's why I do that. Sometimes people who don't know about me, they'll see a certain guest and they'll want to watch that or listen to that interview and like, why is this other dude talking so much? I don't want to hear him. It's about the other person. Well, yeah, I don't want to hear myself that much either, believe it or not. But it's about connection and getting a certain answer and hopefully getting respect because they do hundreds and thousands of interviews. So you're hoping for that connection to get the best conversation, and that's how it happens, and that's at least how I think it happens. So I want to do a little post interview conversation, but before I do, if you're not familiar with the other interviews I referenced, talking about One in a Million with Ernie C and Tracy and Roberta, let me play you some highlights right now. And so it's all right here for you. So it's about 6 minutes, three different interviews of them, just, about a 2 minute highlight of each. So for your listening pleasure or viewing pleasure, depending upon how you're consuming this, Tracy Amos, Roberta Freeman, of course, the background singers for Use Your Illusion. They've been on my podcast, both very, very sweet, sweet people. Roberta has been on a few times and gave very thoughtful answers to me asking about One in a Million. And Ernie C., has been on a couple times as well. Awesome dude. Uh, Giving a very straight up answer. Is Axel racist because he used this word? Well, here are their answers, and we'll talk more on the other side. What your thoughts were when Axel used that word in One in a Million? Because there are people who still claim that Axel is a racist because of that song, which it's more of a character in my view, and the way it is, and kind of like there goes the neighborhood describing the scene. So, what were your thoughts when One in a Million came out?
I have no thoughts on that whatsoever. That didn't bother me. It didn't even raise an eyebrow. It's the person that says it with intent that raises the eyebrow.
Exactly.
Axel, I know he's not that dude. He can say whatever he wants to say. He's not that dude. We do a lot of cop killing. We're killing cops. We're not killing cops. He can say what he wants to, but he has that's not in his heart. His bodyguard was a black man. For the longest, So if you're a racist, why would you have a black man protect your life, So that doesn't bother me at all.
I was like, yeah, okay. I had already done. I was getting off a tour with Cinderella, and I was like, yeah, let me go on the road with them, And from what I learned hanging out with Slash, and didn't get any racist vibe or anything. I think it's really important to talk about this because it's so controversial. And at the time, maybe it was my ignorance or I was so young and, I was just like, oh, rock and roll, I just I and because I didn't know the song, you know, I wasn't really introduced to the song. I had heard fans or non-fans say, "Aren't they racist?" And I'm like, "No," but and people would say, "How about that song?" And be like, "What song?" You know. So that's my bad. You know, it's like that is my mistake and my ignorance of not researching, you know, the band before I started working for them. Um, However, you know, at the time, I think, you know, I probably had the same reaction that you did, where I thought Axel was speaking from the point of view of racist America. And
Right.
that's how, you know, middle America or racist America, whatever, thinks. And he was just thinking out loud, you know, and especially because I never got a personally a racist vibe from Axel. He was always super, not only like super sweet and kind to me, but he was very respectful. Like, you know, he wasn't like the other guys, where the other guys would cuss in front of us and be vulgar and, you know, just be rock and roll, you know? And Axel was really like, he would never cuss in front of me. He would always address me properly. He was very, very sweet to me. And so that being said, you know, I guess I couldn't let myself believe that those lyrics meant that he thought I was I almost said it. That he thought I was what he said in the lyrics.
Ooh, progress.
I'm ignorant to it. I just grew up with thinking like it's and I'm a Northerner. I'm a New Yorker. I was like Dukes of Hazzard. I'm like, I don't know. It's a Southern thing. I had no idea how bad it was. I look back, like there are clips of like the Golden Girl episodes about this, and I'm obviously using just pop culture. I had no idea how offensive it was. I look at like Axl Rose or Tom Petty. No way were they doing it to be offensive, wearing Confederate flags. That's my view of it. When he went on stage in a Confederate jacket, did they make you feel a certain way? Because I asked her about One in a Million, and something that I have to learn. Maybe just using that word in a poetical way doesn't make it okay. So I don't know if you have any. I know it's a big transition of questions as far as depth, but I don't know if you, given everything that you work on, something tells me that you're passionate about this stuff. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I'm very, very, very passionate about it. But you know, I would say that, you know, him using the N word, the way I took it when he said it, it was not being used. It was using in the context of how he was saying it. He wasn't using it in a way that was defaming Black people. But at the same time, it was lacking in the sensitivity of understanding the inappropriateness of that line, you know? And I think that's the whole thing. I look at it as like we're souls in human form, okay? So it really doesn't matter what color your human form is, except for the lessons you gain from that human form. You know, what family, what even your religion, they're all lessons for your soul. That's just my way of looking at it. So when I see someone, you know, that's into the Confederate flag, does it bother me? Does it offend me? I feel a little twinge, you know? If they're not being prejudiced on top of it, I just let it go as part of their, okay, they'll figure out that's not cool. You know, it's part of their path. But if they're using it in a manner that is directly hateful, that's a different story. Then I usually will not be in their presence. I would quit. I would speak to them about it. I would speak against it.
So I need to have the hard conversations here. I said at the beginning of the podcast, why would I want to do this if it's just talking about my favorite song for an hour? Oh, I love Guns N' Roses, and that's all it is. I wouldn't be doing this for 9 years. Yes, I love this band, and the people who make it up, you know, past, present. I've had some sort of musical connection or personal connection to all of them in a way, starting when I was younger. Like a lot of things you grow up with, and feelings can change, and you look at things with a different perspective. And you know, here I am. You know, I found Guns N' Roses so early on. I was only 4 when Appetite came out, so it took a little bit later for me. And now here I am doing a GNR podcast for nearly 10 years with my wife and son playing in the background. Hopefully they're not being too distracting for you, but this is what it is. At least they stayed out of the interview with Roddy, and I was able to get it done. Um, so I wanted to talk about when I announced he was coming on, like why would you have him on? Because Faith No More is notorious for hating that tour. He's just going to say negative things. And that wasn't my first thought. My first thought was like, wow, I love Faith No More. I'm never going to get a chance to probably interview anybody else from that band. Certainly not Mike Patton. Let me interview Roddy. And he has other messages to talk about, not just with Guns N' Roses, as you heard. Smart guy. Talking about mental health. There's other things to talk about. So I want to be the interviewer because he has been asked about 1 in a million before, and again, it's in his book. So I think it's best to come from an interviewer who has the perspective that I do, and that's not an ego thing. It's well, I just played it for you. I've done interviews about it. I don't believe Axl to be the negative person that most of the media has portrayed him to be over the years. I'm not that person. I've spoken to enough people and gotten enough positive stories that I think I have an accurate assessment of who Axl is. Enough without knowing the guy. He's flawed just like the rest of us. And the childhood that he came from is horrific. And the fact that he's still here is a miracle. Talking about mental health. He could have easily left us like Kurt Cobain. I mean, and that's so scary to say. And if Roddy comes on, I want to talk to him more about the Kurt and Courtney and things like that. And I really apologize to a listener, Nathan, who wrote out so many good questions for Roddy. And I'm so sorry I could not get to them. But as you could see, I want to make sure that, I have a balance of like, what are they here to promote? I knew I wanted to talk about 1 in a million and just have that connection. So it's even 20 minutes goes by fast. It just goes by fast. So Nathan, if he comes on again, I will prioritize your fan questions. I just want to get that out that I did not forget you and all the other fan questions that were out there for Roddy. I pay attention to everything you say. And this relates to why would you have somebody on that says something negative about Guns N' Roses? So the name that usually comes up, and it's really the only person that has said like really negative things on the podcast, is Alan Niven. And I guess got to preface everything with Alan has always been so kind and generous to me, and that's the only I can never speak ill of him. That's my experience. That's why I couldn't tell Roddy. I can't tell him to feel any different because that's his experience. I'm not going to tell him like, no, Axl's not this person. If he don't feel this way, that's the way you feel. That's the way you feel. So Alan has just made me feel good about, what I do in a career, the way I conduct my interviews. He's just very kind to me, but that does not mean I agree with everything that he says. The first time I had him on, and I always give credit where credit is due, even though I don't talk to the dude anymore, but Mitch LaFon, introduced me. Via internet introduced me, and for whatever reason, Alan gravitated. We had a connection. I tried to do that in an interview, not just, hey, tell me all the dirt, tell me about this. Yes, no, I want a connection. So Alan and I developed some sort of connection. We would have off-air conversations and things like that. And it was that first interview where the story went viral that Izzy may or may not have shown up at a sound check. That was said by Alan. I've heard other, if you want to call it inside sources or whatever, that he may have had his facts wrong. But I mean, so that's just what Alan said. And that's why GNR hates clickbait. Even if he has part of the story right, it may not be all of the story. So that went viral. And why would I not be, why do I get to cut that out? Like, oh my God, that's amazing. And the second time he came on, he even made a point that, like, I don't want to just always talk about Guns N' Roses. Like, let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about how, and I said, like, let's talk about how you felt after you got fired and your career and your life afterwards. And, mentally surviving. And it was a really strong conversation. And it was, it might have been like a long ass time since he came on again. We would send emails every so often, things like that. Especially since, because for a while, I was so connected with Doug in writing that book. And for whatever reason, Doug connected with me as well. I don't go out of my way. I don't try to befriend. And when I make a connection, it's not to make a friend. It's to have a positive experience. Because that'd be weird if I tried to befriend every person I interview. This isn't dating. I'm not trying to date who I'm talking to. It's sometimes you meet a stranger on a train, or it could be a stranger with a mic, and this is something that clicks. So Doug and I for a while we clicked. Alan and I, clicked in a certain way. So when I was approaching episode 500, I wanted to have like a big guest, and not really expecting that I could get anybody. I can't get Duff. I can't get Slash. It's like I'm not going to get somebody like that. I'll always keep hoping. But it's not like I guess on a lark, I really did not think Alan would agree, because he said, I'm done doing podcasts for a while. He did. He didn't really want to talk anymore. I know he had done podcasts for a long time, especially with Mitch, but he was tired of it. And I think that's partially why he wrote his book, to get it over with, which, if you haven't noticed, is postponed again until next year. You may have read Alan is currently suing Guns N' Roses, namely, I guess, Axl, for the delay in the book. I didn't think it was that bad. He didn't say anything that he hasn't said before in a podcast, but then again, I'm not GNR, I'm not Axl, so I don't know if an NDA was signed. I'd like to think all those things they were aware. The publisher, Alan, would know what he could say, what he can't say. So it is very interesting. I believe you can still find the book digitally, like it's on Kindle and stuff like that, but the hard copy is delayed. I didn't get a hard copy. I was sent a PDF, and that's when I was able to read it. And I made a point to read it because, again, when I reached out to Alan for episode 500, it was just to kind of like, let's have somebody who had been a fan favorite of guests, and let's just have a fun conversation. No, now I remember. I wanted to talk about the Doug book. I thought it would be a fun conversation to talk about my journey, especially since I know he wasn't a fan of Doug. He's not a fan of Doug. He really kind of like hates Doug. I hate using that word. And if you remember the conversation, I wasn't going to pile on, but I wanted to have kind of like a therapy session with Alan about my book and get some stories cleared up on his end. It would just be about like him and Doug. And then it blew up into something else. I had no idea he was coming out with a book. No idea when I approached him. So he was happy to do it, of course. And then he was started to do like a ton of other interviews as well, which is, I thought I was getting like an exclusive 2 hours with Alan Niven turned into something else, a book promotion tour, which is fine, whatever. It's not like I wouldn't want to talk to him again. But it was in that conversation, I believe he mentioned how Axl gets 50% of Guns N' Roses income now. And you can call it, you could say it all. I say it about myself. I'm naive. Sometimes as prepared as I think I am for a conversation, I'm not fully prepared. There's always part of me that wishes I had a producer, like while I produce everything, but somebody else who can like hear something and like kind of send me like a question, like a follow-up question if it goes over my head, or if this ever turned into live interviews to hear back from you. I didn't think to push back at that during that interview about the 50%, and that went viral everywhere. And I'm sure Guns N' Roses and the management did not like that, and some fans didn't like that. He's always talking shit about Axl. But I think people need to recall when I had him on again after that, which we spoke about, just to talk about his book. And there's a lot of things in his book other than Guns N' Roses. I did follow up on that question. It's just funny. Vice recently picked up just the 50% quote, but did not follow up on my follow-up question, which was for in the next interview, which I can understand why it's missed, where Alan says, I have no firsthand knowledge of how this breaks down. Kind of just, yeah, if Axl gets 50%, we don't know what that means now. I understand that Axl Rose, when you think of Guns N' Roses, shouldn't be 50% of the band and all the songwriting credits, whether it's Slash, Duff, Izzy, of course, all these other people. But it's a business. This band, whether you like it or not, is also a brand that employs hundreds, if not thousands. I don't think they employ thousands of people. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't know. With the crew and all the tentacles that might go out to other things about, creating merch and graphics and I don't know who's under the Guns N' Roses umbrella as far as how many people they employ, but it is a brand now. It's not just five dudes anymore. It hasn't been for a very long time. So that's why I get it. I didn't push back hard enough, and I don't usually push back that hard too on a guest because they're not there for me to sequester them. Like with Roddy, I'm not going to push back too hard. I'm like, okay, here's my thoughts on One in a Million. Tell me yours. With Alan, I pushed back a little bit. But then you saw he'd get angry. Why would I want to make him angry? We're friendly. It's just, I'm just don't want to be that interviewer. I don't want to be. I know that sometimes that can make for good radio, good for good podcasting. But in this world, there's too many gotcha moments and too many overreactions, and people. The world has enough stress. I really want to make this like a stress-free, fun environment to listen to, where we do talk about serious things. It's not going to be, again, always fluff, but I want to talk about. I mean, Guns N' Roses, they have serious things in their past, in their present. That's why they're my favorite band. That they're not just as much as I love some of those hair metal bands that are just all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The reason why I gravitated towards Guns N' Roses and why I did this podcast because they are just a deeper, more flawed, more human band than most. And let's talk about those things when they happen. Let's try to do it with the right perspective. I'm not going to be that host that's going to go all in. I'm not going to go all in on Axl. I had what I thought was the right perspective on his quote unquote tantrum. He got pissed off. He wanted to throw something at something that wasn't working. Like, I don't do that daily. Like when Harrison's Toys goes off and starts singing something and it just doesn't stop. Like, I can't show him that I throw things. That's not a good thing to teach a child. I understand that, but I get it. I get Axl's frustration and anger at times. And that's why I gravitated towards him when I was a kid. Like, oh, here's somebody who's angry like me, but look at what he creates with it. Look at that. So even if that creation is one in a million, look, there are Quentin Tarantino movies I like. Roddy doesn't like them. I'm not going to tell him not to like them. But yeah, sometimes it's awkward in Pulp Fiction where he's dropping the N-bombs. It's a little, but you take it in the context of what you're doing. If he's really a racist and that's an excuse just to say these words, I think that will come out. Because sometimes that happens. People just like, oh, it's just an act. But they really are that person. I've never heard anything about Axl Rose that is remotely racist or sexist. Remotely. The only negative stuff, again, I really hear are from Alan. And I'm not going to take that away from him. I'm sure there's an element of truth to all of it. That even the people that say, yeah, he was like this, but, he had a reason, or like he's, this. Oh, I don't. You hear the interviews, the hundreds of interviews that I've done talking about Axl. I don't leave much, if any, on the cutting room floor. I'm not holding back some secret that Axl, like I think Josh Freese did this once in an interview, and credit to him. He wanted to fuck with the interviewers, and immediately, because they're like, oh, so how is Axl Rose? What is he really like? One of those interviewers that's just trying to get dirt. And Josh made up some story about like, oh yeah, I saw him kill his dog. And the interviewer's like, what? He's like, nah, man. He's like, he's awesome. Like, I'm just messing with you. And that's something that Alan used to do and leak those fake stories out there. So there's all this perception about Axl that he isn't what people think he is. But when they see that one in a million or they see that tantrum, there's that excuse to be like, oh yeah, he is that guy. He is that guy. Some things are art is subjective. You're allowed to be offended by it. I'm not going to tell you what it's not. I'm not offended by one in a million, but then again, it's not directed towards me. So I come with that understanding. So I come with the understanding that if it does come toward you and you got feel a certain way about it, okay, okay. It's a great song musically. I hope at the end we can all agree with that. So anyway, I wanted to have a little wrap up here to kind of just talk about the Roddy interview and why I would ask a difficult question if it's not going to be a positive response, and talk a little bit more about Alan in the same vein. So, not that Alan has asked, but to come back on. But I think now, if I had him back on, then I'd be asking for it. Then, fuck me. That you just know, especially with the lawsuit, it's just going to be pure venom. And I don't think that would be good for anybody. I wouldn't want to have that conversation. I wouldn't want to listen to it. I don't think Alan wants to even have it. He's probably angry enough. He's like, I didn't want to, this is me speaking. Just what I know about him. I feel like this is what he's thinking. I haven't spoken to him probably since the last time I interviewed him, maybe an email or two. But he's probably like, I didn't want to write this book. I finally put it out. I didn't even like writing it. And now I got to deal with a lawsuit. What the? So I'm sure he's done with it. So that's just my guess. But he's not going to be on the podcast anytime soon because then again, that's just asking for it. And I don't want to have that conversation, when I know going in that it's just going to be, throwing darts. I don't want that. So anyway, that does it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. What will you see next? Well, if all goes scheduled, the next episode, Matt Sorum should be coming back on the podcast. Yes, Matt Sorum. And just like with a lot of people, I'm not going after any sort of dirt. We're going to talk about some cool things. His work with Aerosmith and Youngblood and Charity. Maybe we'll get some GNR and BR in there. I don't know. I haven't recorded it yet. So I guess I'll find out when you do, I guess, when you're listening to this. Also on the way, one of Izzy's ex-girlfriends. Isn't that incredible? I got to credit some listeners for this and I credit all of you who have sent me guests over the years. I mean, there's no way this podcast could exist without you. So Juliet Yima. I know I'm going to pronounce that better once we start talking a little bit. But she's ex-girlfriend of Izzy during like the glory years. I shared some pictures of her and Izzy at the Rolling Stone show on social media for you to see. She's really sweet. She's still friends with Megan and Slash. She's like a world-renowned makeup artist. So I'm just really looking forward to having that conversation as well. So more to come on Appetite for Distortion. It's not ending. This is fun. Like this is just like I get to do this for fun. I just have to squeeze it in between my wife's home playing with my son and he just calls it the room. It's his bedroom. Where there's his toys. There's a bed in there. He doesn't sleep in it. We all co-sleep. So every night he's twisting and turning and kicking me in the face, but I love it. I know it's not going to be there forever. Harrison, do you want to say bye? Come here. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. I just want you to end the episode with me. Come here, come here, come here, come here. So, can you say soon is the word?
Soon.
Soon is the word. So when will we see the next episode? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it. Yeah.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.